tell us about your career. Kind of recapture your career for us. Where did it start? And take us up through your meeting Dmitri Tiomkin.
Oh, that takes a lot of years. I began in the theater after my graduation from Tufts University in Boston. I finished in 29 there. I should have finished in the class of 24, but I had to work, couldn't, my parents didn't have any money. So it took me 5 years to finally graduate from school. And I went into New York. I went in there, my career was music. I wanted to be a singer, a concert singer in those days. You don't hear of concerts so much nowadays, but I took a lot of music there in Boston, and I wanted to go in a concert. Went into New York and tried to get into the theater, and just couldn't. I had my name in all the offices, but no work. This was during the Depression in 1929 and 30. And finally, a friend of mine up there in Harlem, where I lived, I met him. Oh, you might be interested to know I was it's a superstition. There was a theater in Harlem called the Lafayette Theater, yes. And outside on the sidewalk, right in on 7th Avenue, was a little elm tree. And actors used to stand there and rub up against that tree and hope for a job in a show. You know? And so the tree was called the Tree of Hope. and I didn't believe it was supposed to be educated. I had no idea to that effect. But I was standing up against the tree just the same one day, and a friend of mine came up and says, "Jester, you want to try out for a job in a new show, white show downtown?" I said, "White, black, or anything, man, where is it?" And he sent me down to the Schubert Theater. I went down there, and the theater was just crowded, the stage, filled with black men trying out, auditioning. I found out that the Schuberts were going to do a big show, and what was the name of the cat? There was a white actor. I think I'll call his name in a minute. But anyway, Chick Sale put that. He was a great actor. Chick Sale was the star, white star, and they were going to use 15 black singers to do some special work singing in there. We sang with the regular chorus, and then we did two or three things by ourselves. So the little man came out after a while, and I was standing by the piano on the stage. This man came out. He wasn't quite as tall as I am, as short as I am. He was shorter. And he said that, "Men, I have all the singers I need except 2 low basses and 1 second tenor." My voice was bass baritone. I had studied up there in Boston. And he says, "How many want to try out for the bass?" And all these fellas. And this was in 1930, and some of those men were in their 50s, real old-time professional singers, and had the voices right. And when I saw some of these hands, I had worked up in Harlem in what we call gigs, one-night stands with many of them. And I knew good and well I couldn't sing bass down there with those fellas. So I touched him. I said, "Excuse me, sir, I'm a second tenor." And he said, "You're a second tenor?" I said, "Yes, sir." So he said, "Well, then as much as you're here at the piano, I'll try you out." So he vocalized me up the scale, almost broke a tonsil trying to reach a G. And so he took me aside and he said, "Come over here, young man. What is your name?" I said, "Jester Hairston." And he says, "What is your background? You sound fairly intelligent." That's what they thought of blacks, that they had no intelligence at all, you see. And he was surprised that I could make that. When I told him that I had graduated cum laude from Tufts University the year before, and I studied with Mr. Hubbard in Boston. He says, "I know Mr. Hubbard." Hubbard was Roland Hayes' teacher, and that's another story. But anyway, he says, "Well, Jester, you got a job in my show." And I said, "Oh, thank you, praise God for that." He said, "But not as a singer, because you can't sing." I said, that hit me. You're talking about a thunderbolt. That hit me because I had borrowed money from a white woman in Amherst, Massachusetts. She loaned me the money to go to school in Tufts, and that was a lot of money going there. And I looked into how am I going to pay this woman back the money that I borrowed to go to school and all. And I said, "What do you mean I can't?" He said, "Now don't get excited. You've got a job." So he says, "I am going to. You see these men?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, not one of them, I venture, could read music. They wouldn't know a B flat if they saw it coming down the street in a wheelbarrow. But you can read music. I'm going to have you help them to learn the music of my show. But Jester, if you open your mouth on the stage, I'm going to fire you. And that was my first experience in real big show business. And I stayed in that show, and it was a good show. We ran all around the country after we got started. And then when the show closed for the season, we waited, and they came back out another season. And that's my first beginning into show business.
So from this show, Hello Paris, you went to
Hall Johnson. I met a black man up in Harlem, and he had a black choir that did music for shows whenever they could get it. And I went up and sang for him, and he let me come in the choir as a baritone. And then I asked him if I could work up where I could become his assistant. I was more interested in more than just plain singing. I wanted to go somewhere. And he told me this. He said, no, I don't think that you can go very far in my choir or any other choir, not with your attitude. He says, and I said, what do you mean, my attitude? And he says, well, first thing, we're not ashamed of these Negro spirituals we're singing. We're singing can't and ain't. And you're sitting back there singing chant and cant from Massachusetts, he says, and they don't mix in a Negro spiritual. So he says, I'm thinking to put you out of the choir. And that struck me, you know, because I knew that I couldn't get anywhere unless I was connected with somebody who had already had a foot in the door on Broadway. So I had to lose. I worked meticulously coming from Pennsylvania to Massachusetts. I had a different accent altogether, and I had to lose my Pennsylvania accent and get into Boston, lost and harp and cant, you know, and chant and all that, and I really had it down. And come down here, and he tell me I have to go back to can't and ain't again. So, but I knew that I had to do something if I was going to get ahead, and so I began to lose my accent and sing those spirituals, and finally he did make me his assistant.
Now today you do a lot of spirituals. I mean, as a matter of fact, you'll be in concert here Saturday night.
Folk,
Night.
all folk music. That's my whole life.
And you like to sing those spirituals just the way that he was
Just,
telling you to sing.
that's
them.
right. That's right.
You know, tell us about that. You know, tell us the spirituals. What do they mean to you, and what is
the songs?
Yeah.
Yes. I've got more sense as I grew older and began to think of these songs because. You see, I'm only the second generation after slavery. My mother was the first generation. Her mother, my grandmother, was a slave. So it hadn't been long in this country that we had slavery, you see. And here I was trying to, what was I talking about there? I almost forgot.
Where's this?
The point that I wanted to bring out, you asked me.
Well, I said these spirituals, you sing.
Yes, you see. In Boston.
All right, hold on 1 second. Go ahead and start again because they won't hear me asking you the questions and they won't hear me talking to you.
Yeah.
So go ahead and begin again. Make believe I just
yes.
asked your question.
Well, in my early days of working with Hall Johnson, my ancestors were slaves. You see, my grandmother and so forth, and she used dialect, and all of her friends were slaves, and I used to listen to them, you know, and so forth. But we as kids that didn't make an impression on us. We were in school trying to learn how to learn grammar and so forth, and so we looked down on the songs, you see, as menial songs. We didn't want to have anything to do with it. And that was my attitude when I came out of Tufts with my degree. I didn't want to have any association with that. And so he brought me back to it. He said, now, I have a much better music education than you. And I have given up, he played viola in orchestras. And he said, I gave up that on Broadway to work with these songs of my grandparents because I believe they have something and I want to keep them alive. And if you don't want to keep them alive and don't want to work, then let me know. And so I wanted to do anything to stay in his choir because I knew he had a reputation for doing Broadway shows. And then I began to to search and find out. I knew that my folks had sung them and so forth, and I started reading in the library about them, and I became more fascinated. And now I'm involved with trying to bring out the beauty in the songs and what the songs meant to the people. That's why I think maybe people have me come, because I work, I pray over these songs and pray that God will give me some insight as to what was in the minds of the slaves when they created certain songs, you know, what experiences were they going through, experiencing, and so forth. And I really believe that's why churches and schools call me, because I have more than just a knowledge of the notes. So many people will sing the notes of the song, and to me the notes don't mean anything. It's the background. What does the song express, and so forth.
You'll be singing one of those songs tomorrow night.
Oh, I'll be singing plenty of them.
Okay, what is one of those songs? Which one comes to your mind that really, there's a lot of...
I want Jesus to walk with me.
Okay, I want Jesus to walk with me. That's for Lee's sake. Lee will you be there tomorrow night? Mm. Okay. Okay. I want Jesus to walk with me. Okay.
That's a sad song. That is, it's a very important song, and then I try meticulously to see if I can get the historic background of the songs. But with my theatrical experience and so forth, if I can't find the authentic story, I can make up a story that's much better than the slave ever thought of, you know, and use my imagination to bring out the certain point that the story's on.
Jester, tell us what it's like when you're out there on stage. You know, you were talking earlier about how your wife always... Tell us about that here. Did you pack them in?
Oh, well,
but as you go ahead and talk to us about that, tell us also about how you feel when you're out there on stage. You know,
well, I feel that I love God, and I pray when I'm alone that God will help me to learn more about these songs, so that I can make friends with my audiences or with the schools wherever I go in the work that I'm in. They're menial songs, but they mean something, and I've been able to do that. And so when I walk out on that stage, I thank God for the opportunity of giving me a chance to express myself about these songs to such a group of people. And I believe it takes root, because after concerts, people will come up and say how they were affected by certain things and certain stories that I was telling and so forth. And then a lot of blacks, because we've had it so hard so many years, they're angry, and they see nothing good about this type of song. You see, because they have to do with the menial blacks and so forth. And then they're angry with the white man for not giving me a job, or for not permitting us to take advantage of the American dream and so forth. And so they're angry. And I don't think you can get too far just being angry. Do something about it, and something substantial about it. And so my way of trying to do it is to show the people through the stories these songs evolve. They can see, if they got sense, and they can see what the slave went through. And I tell it with not menacing or threatening to kill somebody or to call them hunky or something. I tell the story. There it is. You can see what happened, and open it. And I think it's, I believe so. The government found out about my work on the coast in 1960. As far back as 1960, right from those kids that I was telling you about. That's where they found out about what I was doing with kids on the West Coast, and they decided to send me to Russia in 1960, and they looked up my background. There you are. After they told me that they were considering sending me to Russia, a month or so after that, I got a letter from one of my pals in the little town I came from, Homestead, Pennsylvania. And he wrote, he said, Jester, what in the world have you gotten yourself into? FBI been here asking questions about you. I told my wife, I said, I hope they won't get this incident or that that I was in as a kid. But anyway, I passed, and so they decided they were going to send me to Russia. And and I still am, I was so anxious when I found out they were going to send me to Russia with these songs that I have, to try to make friends for the United States. I was so happy that I went on my own to the Berlitz School of Languages and engaged a teacher to come to my house to teach me Russian. And he came for a year. All of 1960, I was studying Russian conversation. He'd sit there where you are, and we talk in Russian. He told me a lot of lovely, lovely folk stories of his life too. They're beautiful, and they corresponded with my life. Then, in '60.
Okay, here's what I want to do. We have there's 3 points I want to cover, and I want to make these questions and your answers fit into the flow of the program.
Yeah.
And so what I want to do is come back to the rest of the experience. But I want to focus on 3 different things before the time gets going here.
Yeah.
One of those things is what things are you best known for? And we'll go into the Dmitri Tiomkin piece, but what things are you best known for? And tell us a little bit about what it was like working on the shows. For example, Amos and Andy and the Tarzan movies. Tell us your feelings about working on those shows and some of the interesting things that happened. You might even start by saying, probably what I'm best known for is the Amos and Andy show itself.
Yeah.
And just tell us something about that, how you got that job, and what the show entailed, and the Tarzan movies after, and then how you feel looking back on it. And then you can discuss, we'll go into talking about your meeting Dmitri Tiomkin, how difficult it was for black men to get work and to have parts that really meant something. But begin by telling us about what it is you think people would best know you for. And how you felt there, how you got those jobs and how you felt doing them.
All right. You want me to start
there?
Yeah. Well, I think that in all my years in show business, and I went in show business in Hollywood in 1936, and then later on I got a chance during the war, 44 I think it was. I got a call from a friend of mine who was playing the part of Sapphire in the Amos and Andy show. She was a friend of mine and my wife's. And so she said they're going to have a new character in the show, Leroy, the Kingfisher's brother-in-law, and why don't you go over and try to read for that? And I would never have known about it if it hadn't been for Ernestine. And so I went over and read for it and got the part. And it was... Leroy was Sapphire's brother in this picture, in this play. And in those days, work was hard to get parts in theater. Blacks had a terrible time trying to get into theater because there was so much prejudice. There were very few parts in the first place using blacks. As I won't say, they were scarce. And then when they used them, they got only menial parts to do. You didn't get, none of them got real decent parts that showed the acting ability of the person, You just want someone to act as a fool. And so Leroy was a character that rode freight trains, and he came home and ate the Kingfisher's food and drank his liquors and things, and then gone back out on a freight, something like that. And but I did every part that I got, first because we had to eat and you had to do something. Had it not been for the fact that I and Ernestine and the people on that play and other plays, Step and Fetch It and so forth. He was way before me, Step and Fetch It. But if it had not been for Step and Fetch It doing what he did in the pictures and the other actors, myself and others, and those menial parts, you wouldn't have the fine actors, the Sidney Poitier today, the thing. You'd never get to him because we had to come up through. They had to gradually go through that. So I've been in a lot of menial plays, the Amos and Andy show, and played all sorts of waiters and so forth, and Tarzan pictures. Tarzan was out there naked, one picture that I tell the kids about of my experience in a Tarzan picture called Tarzan's Hidden Jungle, where I had to work with 3 lions, and the kids get a kick out of my experiences there. But that was just a meal and where I walked around and had a whole lot of feathers and brooms and everything on as a witch doctor. and they thought of us as those kind of characters. But you had to take them. And through taking those characters, I got someplace else.
Now, but your talent was not as much in acting, although
No.
your talent was really in music.
In music.
And yet that was a difficult thing for you to get in Hollywood. So tell us about, what it was like back then trying to get music, and then of course your meeting with Dmitri Tiomkin and what came from there.
Well, yes, the only songs that you sang with the ones who did get work sang the spiritual songs or some comedy songs, slapstick comedy and so forth. That's the only thing you could get to do. And but then, and my background after finished school was music, and I after we got out there in Hollywood, the choir I was with, we did the Green Pastures picture. We did it on Broadway, and it ran for 2-3 years, and then we went to Hollywood and did the picture. After that, we got nothing. But then finally we got a job. 50 of us were here. We came to Hollywood to stay 6 weeks, and I've been there now almost 50 years. And we got in a picture called Lost Horizons. Dmitri Tiomkin, a Russian composer, was the composer of that music for that picture. And the studio, he had heard our choir after we did the Green Pastures. We were very popular coming from New York, and so he heard the concert, and he liked the choir. So when he got this opportunity to do the music for Lost Horizons, fine with Ronald Coleman, they asked him what choir he would like to use, and he said the Hall Johnson choir, and oh Lord, they had a fit. Oh, they hit the scene, and who in the world ever heard of niggers doing Russian music like that, And Dmitri stunned them. He said, I don't see colors, I hear sounds. I am a composer. I don't see colors, and that's the choir I want, And they didn't have any conception of that type of relation with blacks at all. But finally, they succumbed to him. He said he'd go back to New York, and we did the music for it. And when we began the music, Hall Johnson, I was his assistant, the man who owned the choir, he got sick right at the beginning, and I had to do the arrangements as well as train the choir. And that to me was really a job because I wasn't that good a musician. I finished in music, but I wasn't really a musician. And so but I did, with the help of God and the help of the other people in the choir, men copying the music as I arranged it. I got through with that experience. And Dmitri, when he finished the picture, and they were so proud of the music and the way we blended it. One scene there, too, that he asked me, the picture was supposed to be Egyptians building the pyramid over in Egypt, English picture, I think it was. And he wanted me to write out some songs of these workers singing, And I wrote out, it went into my brain and wrote out some lyrics. And he brought an Arab in, and he translated this into Arabic, and we had to sing the Arabic on here. Oh, it was difficult, but we went through it. And he said, Jester, if I ever get another picture in Hollywood, you will be my arranger and conductor. And I worked 20 straight years with him in the biggest pictures he had in Hollywood. Just so many nice pictures that I'm just so happy about that experience.
Great, good. One last thing about your roles in Hollywood, and we'll go on to the next subject. How we doing, Lynn? Talk about, of all the pictures you did, what was the most fun? What of those was fun? You took the Alamo before with John Wayne, and you talked about Ryan Steiger and Sidney Poitier in that Academy Award-winning picture. Which of those were the most fun?
Well, I did different types of pictures. Now, I had a lot of fun, and we didn't do too much in the scene.
Sure. Yeah, just, if you can't hear, just yell out. I'm not even really listening to it. Okay, go ahead, Jester.
And some of the pictures, I had more fun naturally than in other pictures. Now, I really had a good time in a picture called Fred Astaire was in a picture where we were right. Finian's Rainbow, yes. I was in a quartet there, and that I was really doing the things that I like to do. There were 3 blacks and one white man in the quartet, and we rode through the country there, and just had a love time singing a crazy song, one of the hit songs from that show, from the stage show. But it was a beautiful experience because Mr. Astaire was a gentleman, and he treated us like gentlemen, and we had a good time on that whole picture. It was a nice affair. I did a picture with, I was a butler with John Barrymore, and that goes way back. I think it was Warner, no, Paramount, I believe. But The Great Profile was the name of that picture, I think. I was a butler a waiter on a train. Yes, a dining car waiter. And John Barrymore was an old-time actor, And I got a kick out of working with the Barrymores because I had seen him do Macbeth or something in Boston when I was a young man back in 23 or 24 at the Boston Opera House. And I told him that I saw him at the Boston Opera House during this Shakespeare. And he says, "My God, were you there?" I said, "Yes," because he was high as a kite during the play. And that I saw him. Then I found out what a marvelous actor he was. John Barrymore was something. I did the music to a picture with the whole Barrymore family. What was the name of that picture? The Russian, one of the Russian emperors or something. John Barrymore, Lionel Barrymore, and Ethel Barrymore. And Dmitri Tiomkin did that. And now I remember doing that. And this scene is so cute, though. This goes through my mind. While we were on the stage, now I don't even remember anything but that. I had dismissed the choir for lunch. My choir was made up of white singers and black singers. I'm like Dimitri. I don't see colors. I hear sounds. And I had both the white and black singers in this picture. And I dismissed them on this lot for lunch. And I had to stay in the studio for something. So I was quite a ways behind them. Walking up the street of the studio, I think it was in Culver City. Walking up this street, I happened to meet a man coming toward me, and he had 2 chimpanzees on a leash, They were working in another picture. And as I passed by, I said, "Hi, cousins." And these things just started waving at me. He could hardly hold them on this leash. The choir heard all this commotion back. They looked at me. I said, "That's my cousin's car." Chimpanzees. As far as I could see them, they were around waving at me. So they may have been some off cousins.
2 final things I want to talk to you about. Talk to us about the role Christ has played in your life, the importance that God has played in your life. Looking back over the years and the things you were allowed to do, you've seen God's hand many times. Talk to us about that. How important has God been in your life?
God has played a very important part in my life from a young child on. There was a lot of prejudice in my hometown, and I had to fight my way to and from school so many times, And I used to tell my grandmother about it. I tell her some white boy beat me up if he was bigger than I, he beat me up. And my grandmother said, "Well, that's all right, son. All the good white folks ain't dead. You're gonna run into a good one now and then." And that didn't affect me then, but after living the life that I have and so many white people helping me, I realized that she knew what she was talking about. That a white woman loaned me the money to go to school that I didn't. I just met her. She helped me to sing. She played for me while I was singing my first year of school, 2 years in school. And then she told me, I was studying agriculture. I wouldn't, if it hadn't been for this woman in Amherst, I wouldn't have been sitting here now, because I was going to be a landscape designer at the University of Massachusetts. And this woman played for me to sing around at churches, and she finally, in my sophomore year, she began to tell me how musical I was. I didn't have any idea. And she said, "You're music, son. You've got to study music." And I said, "No, I want something that helped my mother. And she said music. So finally she decided that she had a little money saved up for, like, she was a school teacher, and school teachers in those days didn't make any money. She said, if you will go to Boston and study music, I will take money from my annuity. She was taking care of her mother, and lend it to you at 5% interest. And I couldn't let that down. And she sent me to school. There was God working in my life. And I've thought often, after I graduated from Tufts and was in New York, she still had to lend me money, send me money to live till I made jobs in the show, till I got started. You see, God was working for me. And I've often thought and praying for her, because she got ill and things, that if I had been in New York, as I was in New York, and had been a different type of fella, I could have quit writing to her, and she never could have found me up in Harlem with all those thousands of blacks, you see, and think, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. I began to pay her back, and it has paid off, thinking God has been my leader all through. I was in the earthquake last August in Mexico City. My wife and I were on the 7th floor of one of those hotels, and hotel was badly damaged. Our room was not hurt at all. The next room right next to ours was all torn up, all out in the hall, and nothing happened to us. So God plays a big part in my life.
You were saying before that you pray a lot now.
I pray constantly. And then I read. I read a lot. And I read a couple sentences sometime long time ago where Paul says, pray constantly. And that's what I've been practicing. And it has paid off in my life. And little things. I thank God for the little things as well as the big things. Coming here the other day, day before I came, I lost my ticket, my airplane ticket. And I couldn't find it in the house anywhere around. And I asked God, would you please show? I know so I have to buy a new ticket. And sitting there, the telephone rang down in my den. I went down there and was answering the telephone, and there was a lot. I've been working on my taxes, and I was just doodling with the other hand, you know, and looked in pushed one envelope, and there I had put my ticket in one of my tax envelopes, you see, and it came right out. And I had asked God, and he showed me. I thank God for those little things, every little thing.
Jester, as you look back over your life now, you've been through Hollywood, you've done a lot of major works, you've been in Broadway, you've done a tremendous amount of things. From a godly perspective, from your relationship with the Lord, what would you say to young people are really the important things in life? You know, what would you say to them? How would you encourage them?
Well, I had a good bringing up. Very poor my folks were. We had nothing. But I did have a Christian bringing up. My grandmother was a Christian woman, and my mother was too. And I went to the Sunday schools, just like the rest of the kids, and so forth. And I think the background they gave me, even in that poor little family, helped me in meeting people. I was on ship I ran 6 summers on the ships trying to make money from Boston to New York. Toughest guys you ever saw in your life. Fight every night on that ship. And I didn't get in any fights or anything. And almost everybody got in fights. They were so tough. I bought when I found out, that was my first time on a ship, 1924. And when I found out I was in such bad company with these tough guys, you know, I went uptown and bought a .32 revolver and came down on the ship. Didn't buy any cartridges for it at all, but just sit on my bed every night and clean the gun. That cleaner, they saw that was my deterrent. They had nobody. I never got in a fight. 6 years, didn't get in one fight. Put it under my pillow and go. Next night, clean my gun off and things. And even on that ship, I praise God. And while the fellas, they had a place down there where everybody gambled. We called it Wall Street, you know, all kind of games going on down there. I'd sit up in my bed, and in those days, 1924, ukuleles were very popular. And I played a little uke and sing my spirituals, and some of the older men liked these songs would come up and sit around, and we'd sing these spirituals. Some young fellas down there, if they win on a hand in poker or something, they'd sing, they made bathroom gin in those days. It was prohibition, and they sent a whole picture of this gin up to to liven my prayer meeting up. But I sang it just the same. I believe in it.
What is the most What is the most significant thing in your life? Okay. I want to finish by asking finish answering these two questions. One is, what is the most significant thing that you think you've done in your life? And try to keep the answer to about a minute. I want to kind of use it as a final comment. And the second, Jester, would be, what would you like to be most remembered for? You know, when people talk about Jester Hairston, you might say, I don't want to be remembered for Amos and Andy. I don't want to be remembered for Tarzan and his belittling things. I want to be remembered for, and you know, you were talking before about helping young people.
Yeah, I'd like to be remembered.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, the first one you said was what?
Jester, what do you think is the most significant thing you've done in your life?
I think that the most significant thing I've done in my life is to give people, young people especially, but people in colleges and churches all around. I don't know who has had the opportunity to go to the places that I have, as long as I have done this work since 1929 and 1949. And I have been invited into places, churches and schools and things that 40 years ago they wouldn't even permit me to go across the campus. And now they want me. Places, churches in the South and so forth. And I've opened doors like that through these menial spirituals and my way of explaining what was in the minds of the slaves and so forth. And it was not Uncle Tom. I just showed them that the songs had something, that those slaves took the religion, what little religion was taught them, and that was very little, because they were just taught, slave, obey your master and you go to heaven. And that's all there was to it, you know. If you don't, you're going to hell. But they took that, and they had a background of religion. They weren't the gods of Moses and Aaron, but they had religions in Africa, and that's the reason they could relate to the Christian religion, and they felt it, and they created these songs. No other race of people in our country here has created in America the volume of songs that we have and about Jesus.
And lastly, you're talking now to a young person who's beginning to live his life. What encouragement would you give them? What are the really important things? Talking to a young person watching this program, what would you encourage them to do, especially as far as God's concerned in his life? What would you tell him is really the key to life as you look back on it?
Well, in just a few sentences, I would have to say that I believe in God. If you believe in God, He will help you. And learn as much as you can from any person who knows and whom you know knows more than you about the subject you are studying or whatever. And it will help you. You never know. Just pin it up there and meet another person. Try to treat other people as they treat you. Do unto others as they do. That's my hallmark in life. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and you can't go wrong.
Jester, any final comments you'd like to make that I haven't covered? Any things you think are important as far as understanding you and your life?
Well, I've tried to cover as many as I could, but I'm so happy that my country, now I prayed for the opportunity. The more I've gotten into these spirituals, there's so much a part of me that I have prayed for the opportunity of taking them as far as I can around the world, as long as God let me live. And He has given me so many opportunities opened up, and even at 85, I feel young and capable of going another 40 years. But I want to just go around. There's a song to tell what Jesus has done for me, and I think it's coming. I think I'm having an opportunity. The opportunities that I get, and especially in the south of our country, just wonderful. All over the world. In Africa, I've been 4 times to Africa, and these songs are just as much appreciated in Africa as they are in this country. So they have something. Jesus is behind them.
Any other comments you'd like to make that we haven't really covered?
I'm thankful to be on this, and I hope that what I've said will go out and reach somebody's heart. I don't think in terms of negative things. There's so much negative things you could overwhelm you, but there are a lot of nice things in this world. I try to keep that.